Hey everyone, it's Mr. Drake. We're going to start our next unit now. This unit is on imperialism. Imperialism is an era in history that sort of ties into our last two units, which were, if you're in my class, on industrialization and on nationalism. So by the time we're done here, you should be able to, in addition to defining imperialism, be able to identify reasons that nations imperialize other countries or regions, and you should be able to explain why imperialism succeeded, why it took hold. Also be able to define those terms at the bottom in addition to imperialism, social Darwinism, colony, and protectorate. So, starting off, what is imperialism? The textbook definition of imperialism is the domination by one country of another country, and that could be in political, cultural, or economic areas. It could be in any combination of those areas. The root word of imperialism is empire. So this is where you begin to see European countries developing a global empire by exerting their influence and control over other parts of the world. This started in the exploration age when countries began to set up trading posts or naval bases in various spots around the world. But it really exploded in the 1800s, and we're going to talk about why over the course of this video. Over the course of this unit, we're going to talk about three particular areas that imperialism by European countries influenced. That is Southeast and East Asia, that's mainly China and Japan, but also Southeast Asia, modern day Thailand and Vietnam and those areas. We'll talk a good bit about India and also about European influence in Africa. Now, why did imperialism happen, first of all? A big reason was the Industrial Revolution. As countries industrialized, they began to need more and more natural resources to actually produce manufactured finished goods. So, they needed to go elsewhere to find resources. Great Britain, geographically not that big, for example, so they're going to have to look other places for resources for their factories. The Industrial Revolution also created a demand for trade markets. As countries in Europe manufactured goods, they wanted to be able to sell them and turn a profit, but maybe wanted a bigger market than their own people or their own country could provide. So they began to trade in places like China and India and Africa, and exerted their influence as a result. There was also a great deal of nationalistic competition. We've talked about nationalism and that idea of national pride and patriotism and the idea that your nationality or your country is better than others. So this sort of became a contest between European countries who could develop the biggest, most wide-reaching, wealthy empire. So countries began to expand for that reason. There's also a humanitarian desire to spread religion and technology. There was a feeling among many European peoples that other less fortunate people around the world should have access to this new technology that had been developed in Europe, to the Christian religion, which of course they saw as being superior and the correct religion to be practiced in most cases. So there's a great deal of missionary work done in these third world areas like India and Africa during this time for that reason. There's also the concept of social Darwinism, and if you've taken biology, you're probably familiar with Charles Darwin and his theory of natural selection, which was laid out in his book The Origin of Species in 1859, which said that the species that are strongest and best able to adapt to their surroundings are the ones that will essentially survive. And social Darwinism is the application of that principle to human society, or to society. And the idea of social Darwinism is that weaker nations needed to be conquered so that the human species could become stronger, so that these strong, virtuous, wealthy nations would rise to the top, and as a result make the world better. So this could be construed as being racism in some cases, or being discriminatory or condescending towards the poorer areas of the world. But it was a big driving force behind a lot of European countries' imperial ambitions. Now, why did imperialism work? There are two factors that really kind of combine here. One is Western strength. And by Western, we're referring to the countries in Western Europe, the United States, although we're not going to talk a lot about the U.S. in this unit as far as world civ goes. But these Western countries, like Great Britain and France and the Netherlands and Belgium and Germany, had very strong militaries, good economies because of the Industrial Revolution, and they had very well organized, strong government. On the other hand, a lot of non-Western empires in Asia and Africa were beginning to sort of fall apart. The Mughal Empire, which is a big Muslim empire in India that ruled through much of the second millennium, they began to weaken at this time, as did the Qing dynasty in China and a lot of African kingdoms that had been very, very powerful for a long time, Mali and Songhai, for example. They were decimated by the slave trade, which led to a decrease in population that they never actually recovered from. So these areas, India, China, and Africa, sort of became ripe for exploitation and conquest by these European powers. Now, it didn't just take hold easily. There was some resistance, both at home and abroad, as it were. In the places that got imperialized, like India and China, you have some nationalistic groups in those countries or regions that spring up and fight back against being conquered by these European powers, and you'll learn about some of those over the course of this unit. Also, some Westerners thought it was immoral and hypocritical for European countries to go conquer these places. And we'll talk a little bit about that over the course of this unit as well. Now, what did imperialism look like? Once these areas were taken over, they had to be ruled in some way, shape, or form by the imperial power, the European country that took it over. The two most common forms that took was a colony and a protectorate. Colonies are areas under the full political control of another country or an area. If you think about the 13 colonies in North America, they were under the political control of Great Britain before the American Revolution. Colonialism can be direct or indirect. Direct colony or direct rule in a colony means that people from the ruling country come to that place and hold the offices and hold direct control. So, for example, you would have a British person in India ruling as the government if it was a direct rule situation. Indirect rule in a colony means that you basically use local rulers to impose the system of government or the rules that you want enforced. So you could leave the local nobles or sultans or what have you in power in these areas, but they would sort of be beholden to the European powers and have to listen to them and do what they said. In a lot of cases here as well, the imperial powers would set up schools to educate people in those countries in the tradition of that imperial country, which sort of imposed, British customs and traditions or French customs and traditions on these people that are living in these areas that have been taken over. Another form of colonial government, or imperial government, I should say, is protectorate, which is when you leave the local rulers in place and simply advise them on what to do. And even if you weren't directly ruling them in this case, there was still some military presence from the overpowering country, and you might see some military presence needed if there was an uprising or revolt, for example. So, this is a very basic rudimentary introduction to imperialism. Again, as we go through this unit, if you're in one of our classes, you will learn about specifics of imperialism in various places as we progress. As always, ask your teachers if you have any questions. Cheers.